It started with a simple text. Nothing loaded, just a check-in about dinner and if she needed anything from the store. I sent it mid-afternoon. The bubbles didn't appear. Hours turned slow. When her reply finally came, it was a single line that answered nothing and closed the door without saying it had been opened. I read it twice, then slid the phone back onto the table and let the quiet sit. She came home later than usual. The porch light caught her wrist as she unlocked the door. The silver bracelet flashed once, then settled against her skin like it had always been there. She used to hold it between her fingers when we talked about staying true, the way someone anchors a story with an object. "It means we're steady," she'd said back then. I remembered that without wanting to. She brushed past me with a hello that didn't wait for a response, setting her bag down in the hall, already working through something that didn't include me. We had people over that weekend, her friends mostly, with a couple of mine mixed in. The room was light and easy at first. I told a small story, something harmless about the barista mixing up my coffee order and me drinking it anyway. She laughed a notch too loud, then caught herself mid-smile as her phone lit up. The laugh thinned. She lowered her eyes. The group's energy shifted by degrees. Two of her friends exchanged quick looks. One of mine raised an eyebrow in my direction, then looked away as if he hadn't. I didn't ask about the message. I moved around the kitchen, handed out plates, kept my pace even. She stood near the counter, the bracelet tapping against the glass every time she gestured. I watched people orient around her, then pull back when she drifted. It wasn't dramatic, just a slow rearranging of bodies and attention. The kind of movement you only notice if you're standing still. Later, while she spoke with one of her closest, I caught fragments, plans, schedules, a lot of nothing filled with confidence. I saw the other girl nod, glance at me once, then smooth her face blank like it had never turned. Shifting loyalties don't announce themselves, they simply reorganize the air. Before bed, she sat at the edge of the couch and scrolled. I sat on the floor with a book open but unread. The bracelet rested against the seam of the cushion, a small crescent of light. She told me once it was a promise she wore, a reminder she could reach for. That felt distant now, like language from another house. When she finally set the phone aside, she asked a question with no weight. "You good?" I nodded. She watched my face a beat too long, waiting for a reaction I didn't offer. Then she stood, stretched, and went down the hall. The room exhaled after she left. I cleaned the glasses, wiped the counter, and took the trash out. The night was still. In the quiet, the day took shape in small details, the delayed text, the glances that skittered and settled, the bracelet catching light and saying less than it used to. Nothing proofed, nothing final. Just a pattern I could trace with one finger. A storm doesn't need thunder to be real. Sometimes the air tells you first. I listened to it, and kept my hands steady. The weeks slid by in small edits. Our dinners thinned out. She'd text late, running behind, don't wait up, and I'd slide her plate into the fridge, label facing out as if that mattered. The house took on a different sound at night. Keys, a soft laugh in the hall, water running, then a door click and silence like a lid. When I asked about her plans, she tucked hair behind an ear and kept her eyes on the kettle. "Just out." The steam rose. She stirred her tea long after the sugar had vanished. On her wrist, the silver bracelet flashed once and fell still. We bought it the day we promised to say what needed saying, even when it was inconvenient. That memory didn't argue. It just sat there, unblinking. Her phone started living face down. Group chats came alive with names I didn't recognize. She'd angled the screen, thumb quick, shoulders loose in that particular way you get when your head is somewhere else. If I asked where she was headed, she'd give me a shape without edges. "A place near the river, some of the girls, won't be late." She wasn't lying, exactly. She was editing. My calendar stayed normal. Work, runs, a beer with Mark after. He watched me for a moment too long and finally said, "You too good?" I shrugged, took a drink, kept my face steady. People read answers into the way you swallow. He nodded like he understood more than I'd given him. That's what concern looks like when it respects your privacy. At a friend's birthday, her circle tightened when I drifted near. Their smiles stretched, then loosened when she came back from the bar and touched my shoulder without weight. I caught a quick exchange of glances that didn't belong to me. Nothing dramatic. Just the quiet recalibration you see when people start deciding which way is safer to stand. The bracelet shone under the low lights while she told a story I'd heard before, only lighter this time, with details skipped. I let the pause between us hold its shape. Her late arrivals grew regular. Shoes by the door, a faint scent that hadn't lived in our house before. She moved around me in careful arcs, kind smile, quick kiss, a question about my day dropped in like a coin so the machine would keep working. I answered simply. I didn't perform. At home the echo wasn't just sound. It was how conversations ended sooner than they should have, how a question would bump against the edges of her patience and slide off. Once, she caught me looking at the bracelet and lifted her wrist as if to say, "See? Still here." I nodded. We didn't mention what it was supposed to stand for. I told myself it might be a phase, a blip of restless energy. Life gets crowded. People stretch. I left the doors open. I kept the lights soft. I stayed out of her way without disappearing. The cracks were there if you wanted to stack them. I tried not to build anything out of them yet. On a quiet Sunday she slept late. I made coffee, read the same paragraph 3 times, and put the mug down where her ring had once left a faint circle on the table. The day was clear. Out back, the wind moved the leaves in one direction, then back again. I took it as a weather report and nothing else. I could wait. I could give her space to say it, or not. I'd know soon enough. That night the house was quiet enough to hear the fridge cycle. She'd come in late, dropped her jacket on the back of a chair, and gone straight to the bedroom with a half-muttered, "Long day." The jacket slid to the floor when I brushed past. A folded card fell from the pocket and skidded under the table. I didn't go looking. It was there, and the floor wasn't an altar. I bent, picked it up, set it on the table under the soft light. The paper was thick, the kind you buy when you want words to feel heavier. 3 lines. A day. A time. The usual spot. A first name I knew well enough to place without effort. Familiar was the word that landed. I let the note sit with the salt shaker as if it belonged there. When she came back for water, I didn't say anything. She reached for the glass, saw the card, and stilled. Her fingers curled the corner. For a breath, nothing in the room moved. Then her thumb drifted to the silver bracelet on her wrist, grazing it the way you'd soothe a restless thought. She didn't look at me at first. When she did, the smile she offered was the kind that tries to close a door softly. "It's nothing," she said. "Just catching up." "With who?" I asked, even though the name was on the paper between us. She glanced down, as if confirming the letters hadn't changed. "Old friend," she said. "You know him." The bracelet caught the light. I remembered the night she'd pressed it into my palm and called it a promise. Not dramatic, just a line we'd agreed not to cross without talking. Transparency had sounded easy then. "When?" I asked. "Tuesday," she said. "I forgot to tell you. Sorry. It's been." She didn't finish the sentence. Her thumb kept tracing the silver. I nodded and took my hand off the back of the chair. The chair rocked once and settled. I didn't push. I didn't ask why the plan needed a card tucked into a pocket instead of a line spoken out loud at the sink. She waited for a reaction I didn't offer. After a moment, she slid the note into her palm and folded it again. The bracelet, now half hidden by her sleeve, clicked lightly against the cup as she lifted it. That small sound stayed in the space after she went back down the hall. In the quiet, I stood at the edge of our routines and looked over them as if they were a map I hadn't checked in a while. A dry cleaning ticket I didn't remember dropping off. A new password on the shared calendar that had once been a formality. Receipts tucked into a bowl that weren't from places we chose together. Nothing arguable. Nothing that could be held up and examined in front of a neutral jury. Details that drew a line anyway. Her circle was elsewhere these days. The group thread lit her screen and tilted her mouth into shapes I wasn't part of. Names got mentioned without being explained. The easy way her friends used "we" around her had started to exclude me without malice, like a tide rerouting itself around a piling. I took the card out once more after she fell asleep and read the 3 lines again, not because I didn't remember them but because repetition made them ordinary. If something can be ordinary, it can be handled. I slid it back where she'd left it, on the counter next to the bowl of keys. No hiding. No staging. In the morning she moved quickly, as if momentum itself could outrun a conversation. The bracelet flashed when she tied her hair. It flashed when she reached for the door. "I'll be late," she called, already in the hall. I stood with a coffee mug warming my hand and watched the door close. The lock clicked, neat and impersonal. It didn't take long for the picture to sharpen. Not a single blow, just an accumulation of angles. A message sent when she was in the next room instead of a sentence spoken across a table. The familiar name. The usual spot. The way she deferred to her friends' calendars and left mine blank. I didn't chase. I noted. I let the pauses settle and stayed with them long enough to see what they were hiding. Whatever this was, it had stepped out of the fog and decided to be seen. That was enough for now. Days stretched thin and even. She kept our calendar light and everyone else's full. I let the silence do what it does, show me the shape of things, while I rinsed plates, folded laundry, marked small changes in the margins of my mind. One afternoon her friends circled our living room with soft voices and heavy perfumes, shoes tucked under the couch, bags on their laps like shields. I stayed in the kitchen, running water over a glass long after it was clean. Their words drifted in the way steam does, there, then gone. "She just needs her space," one of them said, careful, like it might crack if she pressed too hard. No one argued. A couple of them hummed, the kind of sound people make when they agree without wanting to say it. A chair leg clicked against the floor and then stilled. I didn't step closer. I didn't lean away. I let the line hang and tried it on for size. Space. As if that explained the blank spots on her calendar, the careful edits in her stories. She came through for water, eyes skipping off mine. The silver bracelet caught the light and flashed against the cabinet, a quick flare and then a dull shine. She used to spin it while telling me secrets. Now she smoothed it flat and moved past. On her wrist it looked heavier than it was, pulling at something I couldn't name without sounding dramatic. It wasn't just metal. It was a quiet ledger of promises we'd made and stopped mentioning. I heard laughter from the other room. It sounded practiced. Then a whisper that wasn't meant to carry. "He's steady. He'll be fine." The tone had that comforting shape people use when they're trying to convince themselves first. Shifting loyalties don't announce themselves, they tilt a degree at a time. An invitation left unsent. A message answered in a thread I'm not part of. I noticed who texted her in the kitchen and who put their phone away when I walked in. One friend peeled off and wandered into the kitchen, grabbed a towel, and dried a plate that didn't need attention. She said something basic about the weather and waited for me to ask a question I wasn't going to ask. I handed her another plate. She took it, glanced at the bracelet, and then at my face, as if looking for a verdict. I didn't offer one. Later, after they left, I found a lipstick print on a glass and a folded blanket that hadn't been folded before. Small kindnesses, small messes. The house held their afterimage. She scrolled on the couch, knees tucked up, thumb moving without pause. I sat across from her and watched the bracelet sit in the lamplight, a neat circle that used to mean more than it could carry now. Trust didn't vanish in a scene. It thinned out. It snagged on little things. The way she ignored a direct question, the way her friend's concern bent toward her and away from us. I wasn't angry. That would have been easier to manage. I was cataloging, noting the frequency, the tone, the lag between cause and cover. The quiet had a texture to it, and once you feel it, you can't mistake it again. Another day, another round of careful phrases. "You've been working hard. It's just a season. She needs breathing room." All true in some way and incomplete in another. I didn't argue with them. I let them sit where they landed. By the end of the week, I had enough pieces to see the outline, even if I couldn't color it in. The bracelet stayed on, bright and inert. The room kept its calm. I made dinner for two and plated it anyway. If there was a map forming, it was drawn by their movements, not my guesses, and I was done pretending not to read it. The familiar face showed up at a Sunday thing on a back patio, the kind of gathering where everyone brings something and the music stays low. He arrived with a pie and measured greetings, a little too careful about where his eyes landed. She was already there, in a light sweater, the silver bracelet loose against her wrist, catching sun off the rim of a glass. I recognized him without needing the name. The outline I'd been tracing had a body now. He found me on purpose, or maybe we just drifted toward each other through the milling. Either way, we ended up beside the cooler, working through stock phrases like people who don't want to make more work for the day. He talked about how good it had been to reconnect, that word shaped like a cushion. He mentioned he'd been checking in with her during this time of change. He looked at me after he said it, as if to see whether I'd mark the phrasing. I let the pause settle. I asked if he preferred sparkling or still. We both pretended that was the question. Inside, near the sink, she laughed at something a friend said and touched her bracelet with her thumb, a tiny circle on the underside, like she was tracing a date no longer relevant. She glanced toward us and then away, quick and careful. She waited for a reaction I didn't offer. Her friends rotated through me in twos and threes like a tide testing a shoreline. They asked how work was, how my dad was doing, whether we'd made plans for the holiday. Their tone carried the script, gentle, provisional, full of exits. One of them took a breath and said she was proud of her for taking space. She watched my face the way people watch a pot they don't want to boil over. I nodded once. "Everyone's doing what they need to do," I said. That sentence satisfied nobody and changed nothing. Still, it let the moment pass. My own friends were there too, spread along the fence, holding plates rather than opinions. One of them caught my eye and lifted his chin, the kind of check-in we learned as teenagers. No speech required. He didn't drift over. He didn't need to. I kept to useful tasks, refilling bowls, carrying out folded chairs, standing where conversations intersected without asking to be included. Observing is simpler than repairing, and cleaner. The room taught me what it wanted me to know: who leaned toward her, who leaned away, who ran interference, who began to ration their warmth. A few of her girls, the ones who once texted me for recipes or to borrow tools, greeted me with a different weight, like they were reassigning themselves in real time. Shifting loyalties don't announce themselves, they adjust posture. At one point I walked in on them in the narrow hallway by the bathroom, the familiar face angled slightly in front of her, his voice pitched low, steady. He wasn't doing anything you could circle in red. That was the point. His hand hovered near her elbow, then retreated. The bracelet slid, a soft metallic note. She looked over his shoulder, and found me there. I stepped back so they could pass. No one said sorry. Later, by the grill, she approached with a plate and the edited smile she reserves for public rooms. "You okay on drinks?" she asked, as if that corner of logistics was the only line connecting us. "I'm good," I said. "You?" She nodded, then added, "It's just a lot right now." She held my eyes long enough to remind me I once lived behind them, then turned to wave at someone calling her name. I noticed the shift and kept it to myself. As the sun slipped, little groups formed and reformed. The familiar face wasn't in any of mine, but he was always close enough to register. He handled goodbye with care, a half hug you could defend, a phrase about catching up soon. I shook his hand. It was warm and unremarkable. He waited for a cue I didn't give, then left. By the time the patio cleared, the tables were sticky with rings. I gathered cups and stacked plates. One of her friends lingered to help and said, "She's lucky you're so steady." It wasn't a compliment so much as a test. "Steady is easy," I said, setting a glass in the sink. "You just don't move." That night, at home, she moved around the kitchen like someone visiting a place they used to rent. The bracelet clicked against the counter. She put her phone face down, and told me she might be out late 2 nights this week. No specifics, nothing to pin to the wall. I didn't ask for a calendar. I wiped the surface again to make it clean. I'd stopped looking for reassurances inside her wording. The map kept drawing itself with or without my consent, and the lines were bold enough now. My footing didn't depend on her story anymore. It depended on where I chose to stand. We ate in the soft clatter of utensils and the hum of the vent. She was looking past me, past the table, toward nothing I could see. The bracelet sat loose on her wrist and slid each time she lifted her glass, a small metallic note in the quiet. "Which 2 nights?" I asked. She didn't look up. "Haven't decided. Are they this week? Maybe." She smiled without warmth, like we were testing a microphone. I let the pause settle. The oven clock ticked over a minute I didn't need back. The knife on my plate skated once against porcelain. "I need a little more than that," I said. My voice came out thinner than I planned, like air through a narrow opening. Her laugh was quick and bright, but it didn't include either of us. "Why? So you can schedule me in?" She said it lightly, like a line she'd practiced in her head. "I want to know what my days look like," I said. "That's all." "It's fine," she said, waving it away. "Don't make it a thing." The bracelet knocked against the stem of her wineglass. The sound was louder now. My water sweated onto the table and I moved the glass onto the coaster, a small correction I could make. Her phone buzzed against the wood, face down. A second buzz followed, stacked right on top of the first, the way a group chat rolls over itself. She glanced at it like a driver glancing at a dashboard light. "Just a flick." "Work?" I asked. "Nothing." She nudged the phone further from my side with the back of her hand. Another buzz. The screen lit the underside of the glass for a moment, a soft glow I wasn't supposed to notice. When she flipped it to silence, the banner was already there. Not a company name. A first name I recognized, and a line that didn't leave much room for misreading. Same place, same time. Her fingers tightened around the phone. The bracelet bit into her skin and left a pale crescent when she set it down. That told me more than anything she might have said. "Tomorrow," I said, keeping my eyes on my plate. "Is that one of them?" She waited for a reaction I didn't offer. "It doesn't concern you," she said. Then softer, as if making it gentler would make it reasonable. "I need space. You know that." The word had made its rounds already. I'd heard it in whispers in our hallway, in the bend of other people's voices. Space. The kind where plans get blurry and loyalties loosen their ties. Another laugh, clipped at the edges, as if the conversation amused her from a distance. She tapped the bracelet, an absent rhythm, and the silver clicked with each beat. The sound made a small map of how we got here. I took a bite I didn't taste and set the fork down. I could feel my mouth wanting to push more questions across the table. I let the urge pass. Her phone sat between us like a third-place setting, humming occasionally, pulling attention, confirming what her tone had already told me. "This isn't a drift," I said evenly. "You know that." She went still. The bracelet stopped moving. For a second, I thought she might look me in the eye and name it. Instead, she glanced at the dark screen, then reached for her glass. "Don't be dramatic," she said, almost bored. I nodded once. No argument. No rearranging her lines. The room stayed quiet, and in that quiet the story unraveled on its own. I cleared my plate, wiped the table where the ring of water had dried, and decided I was done asking for coordinates she had no intention of sharing. We'd booked the table weeks before. 8 settings, the kind of candles that leave a rim of wax like a slow tide. Street noise came and went with the door. She slid into the seat across from me, late by a few breaths. The silver bracelet flashed when she tucked hair behind her ear. She didn't look my way long. I let the first round of small talk burn itself out. Then I set my fork down so it wouldn't ring against the plate. "Is there anyone in these plans I should have known about?" I asked. Even tone. No edge. She kept her gaze on the menu she didn't need. "I told you, I'm figuring things out. I don't have to report to you for that. I'm not asking for a report." I watched the bracelet catch the candlelight. Just a straight line. She smiled, the kind that asks for an argument to lean against. I didn't offer one. She turned to the friend at her side and asked about a new job. The friend answered, but her eyes kept skimming the space between us like it might break. The plates arrived. Someone told a story that should have landed and didn't. When the laughter thinned, I tried again, same volume. "Last Thursday," I said. "The gap. Who filled it?" Her shoulders went still, then relaxed on purpose. "A friend. You don't know him. It's not a thing." At the end of the table, another friend shifted, her napkin twisted into a rope in her hands. She looked at me, then at my wife. "We saw you," she said, careful. "Pine Row. It was just you two. You said you were home?" The word hung there. The room drew in a breath. Someone's fork paused midair. My wife let out a soft laugh, the kind she uses to tidy a room. "You're reading into something simple." She lifted her wrist as if to fix the bracelet, then left it there, the metal snug like it had less room to move. "It wasn't simple," the friend added, voice small but steady now. "It didn't look like just catching up." She waited for a reaction I didn't offer. I watched the bracelet. It used to mean something settled. Tonight it looked like a clasp she couldn't slip. My wife's jaw worked once. "This is inappropriate," she said, eyes on the tablecloth. "I don't know." I held up a hand, palm down, enough to lower the volume without touching anything. "You don't owe me a performance," I said. "Just the truth." A chair creaked. One of her girls, the loudest on other nights, stared into her glass. Across from me, one of my friends folded his hands and kept his face empty. The room had found its slope. It didn't lean my way or hers. It simply stopped pretending to be flat. She looked around for a defender and found no eye to land on. The bracelet shifted once against the bone, a small, bright shackle. For the first time in weeks, she didn't have a line ready. "Okay," I said, and it was not permission. I placed my napkin on the plate, stood without hurry, and thanked the host. No door slam, no speech. Just the simple act of leaving my chair to the silence I'd brought into the room. Behind me, the talk started up in low tones that moved around her, not toward her. I didn't look back. I was done lending my weight to a story that kept changing. I walked home from the dinner without hurry. The house met me the way it always did, lights off, air still, the small click of the door carrying farther than it should. I set the key in the bowl and let my hands find the familiar path through drawers. A duffel sat open on the bed. Shirts folded, then the book on the nightstand, then a pair of shoes. No rush. No ceremony. She came in after midnight, the careful sound of someone feeling for footing in the dark. When she found me in the kitchen, she stopped at the edge of the light. The silver bracelet caught the lamp and sent a thin line over the wall. Her gaze flicked to the bag, then back to me. She waited for a question I didn't have. I let the pause settle. "We can talk in the morning," she said, like she was offering a truce. "Okay," I said. It wasn't a promise. I zipped the bag and carried it to the door. No speech. Just the handle turning and the quiet fall of it behind me. The week unwound itself in small, practical ways. I answered messages when they needed answers. I showed up where I said I would. I slept where I had to. When I came by for the rest of my things, she was on the couch, phone face down, staring at nothing with focus. The bracelet was still on, but looser now, like it didn't belong to her wrist. She started to explain her version, and I didn't stop her. The words folded under their own weight before they met me. Her circle thinned without an announcement. The group thread that used to flood her screen during dinner slowed to a trickle of polite check-ins. The ones who loved a good story grew quiet when the story lost its audience. One friend dropped off a plant and didn't step inside. Another sent a long message about taking care of herself, which is what people say when they're already halfway out of it. At a mutual gathering, chairs shifted. Conversations bent around her instead of toward her. She kept searching for an anchor that didn't move. The familiar face from her past stopped hovering at the edges. Maybe the air got too clear. Maybe attention was the only currency, and the rate changed overnight. I didn't ask. I stood where I said I would, paid my part, left on time. When she looked over at me in those rooms, I gave her the same calm I'd kept from the start. It gave her nothing to push against. Once, I found the bracelet in the kitchen dish with keys and loose screws. The curve of it looked out of place, bright in the wrong way. Later it was back on her wrist, tightened to the last notch, as if fastening it again could stitch the narrative closed. It didn't. It only sat there, catching light, reminding us both of what it used to mean. Metal doesn't change. Stories do. By the end of the month, my side of the closet was a clean line of air. I sent my new address because it was practical. She typed, "We should talk," more than once and didn't hit send, or she did and I replied with when and where, and she let the time pass. Friends I used to share a table with sent quiet thumbs-ups when I bowed out of plans that were really about her. No one chose a side out loud. They just adjusted their routes. On my last trip back, I put the spare key where the bracelet had been. The counter was cool under my palm. She stood in the doorway, smaller somehow, like the space had shifted scale. She waited for something decisive. I left her the same steady quiet I'd been keeping, and walked out into air that felt unremarkable in the best way. I wasn't angry. I was finished, and I stayed finished.